Hey, I'm Hunt, and this is Hunt on LSU, your channel for LSU Fighting Tiger football talk. Enjoy the video. We want you to leave a comment below, hit that like button, and subscribe right below the video. Enjoy. A lot of football we're getting to here on this Thursday. It's that time of year. We talk some Big 12 football, Texas is kind of Big 12 football. Big 12 football for the foreseeable future, and then right after that, SEC football. But let's get into some LSU football here at the top of hour number 2. Matthew Brune, part of the On3 gang over there at the Bengal Tiger, joins us. Matthew, how are you?
Hey, Hunt, I'm doing well. I'm over here in San Antonio for a wedding, so I'm out here for a few days with family and stuff, but happy to come on here and talk with you.
Awesome. Well, let's do it. I'm looking at this list that y'all have had running over there at the Bengal Tiger of the most important players on LSU's football team moving into the 2023 season. And some of them have kind of have piqued my interest as we kind of roll through. I know that you collaborated with Shay and Billy to put this together. One of the ones that I wanted to get to was Deuce Chestnut at 29. That's a guy that I kind of feel like is going to be the second corner opposite Denver Harris. Where do you see him factoring in?
Yeah, so the list, just for context sakes, the list is the aggregate, the average of the three of our lists, so between me, Billy, and Shay.
Yep.
So take the average and put them all together. It is more so a list, I'd say, of talent than value.
Okay.
But still, to your point, I actually had Deuce Chestnut at number 20 on my list. Yeah, you got to talk to Shay, who had him down at 34. Why he had him that low. But yeah, no, he comes in 29th. I think you're right. I think he's in contention for either outside a boundary corner spot or even at nickel, where it seems like I think they're looking for more depth there. Obviously, Sage Ryan is capable. I don't know how high his ceiling is, but he's at least capable. And then Javian Toviano, the freshman, has had a really good spring and showed flashes at safety, at nickel, corner. I mean, he is a really, really talented player. But I think Deuce Chestnut, if I had to put money on it, I'd say he's probably starting at nickel. Some people would say Sage Ryan, some would say Toviano, whatnot. But I think Chestnut has a good shot at nickel, or we'll see how they use him if they want to use him on the boundary.
So it kind of dovetails into the next point I wanted to make, that as I look at the list, we said Deuce Chestnut at 29, Zy Alexander at 25. Is the consensus there with you all that Zy Alexander is maybe a more talented prospect than Chestnut?
I have Zy really, really high. I had Zy personally at 15.
Wow.
So yeah, he comes in at 25. I think he starts opposite. If I had to put the starting secondary together, I would go in an ideal situation. I'd go Denver Harris on one side, Zy Alexander on the other side, Deuce Chestnut at nickel, and then safety be Major Burns and Greg Brooks. So that's my ideal secondary in my head. Obviously, in the fall we'll see if Terrence Welsh can continue showing out, if J.K. Johnson can take that step into a starting position, which I think he is absolutely capable of. I think J.K. Johnson's very talented, but yeah, I'm very, very high on Zy Alexander as potentially being that second corner to start the season.
That's interesting. I think people are a little bit gun shy because of last year and kind of what that looked like with FCS to FBS in the secondary. But maybe Alexander, the more talented prospect in that regard. One guy that you don't have to question the physical gifts, but the production's got to come, is Quincy Wiggins, who y'all have at 20. Your anticipation for Quincy as he enters this next season in his college career?
Yeah, we all had Quincy around the 20 range. I think he's somebody that if he didn't get hurt before the season, I think we see a lot more of him. He just never really found his footing, and then he didn't get a lot of snaps and so on and so forth. But I fully expect him to be in rotation with Savion Jones at defensive end, maybe Deshaun Womack as well at defensive end. He is just such a physical monster that I really can't see him not getting on the field. Like, he is somebody that you give him a full off season, you give him a full fall camp, and he stays healthy. I can see him pushing Savion Jones potentially even for that starting spot. I don't think he's going to get the starting spot, but I'm really high on Quincy Wiggins' upside as a player, and just what he can be for this team this year. Which I understand why people are hesitant. He didn't play last year, but I just believe in the talent level there.
Who do you think's going to lead this team in sacks? Kind of in that vein.
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, if we go through it, I honestly would still predict Harold Perkins, just because I think he's that dynamic and they'll blitz him enough to where I think he'll get enough to somewhere in that 8 to 10 range. But if we had to look at defensive linemen specifically, I'm hesitant to go Ovia Gofu or Braden Swinson at Jack. I think both of them end up with probably around 4 or 5. And then defensive end, like I said, I can see 3 players there all getting substantial run, rotating really well with Davion Jones and Quincy Wiggins and Deshaun Womack. So it's a tough question. Can Mason Smith, get free enough and avoid enough double teams to put up sacks? But if I had to pick on the entire team, I'd go Harold Perkins. Defensive line, I'd probably lean Davion Jones.
I think that's kind of where I am. If you're going to see somebody that I think has a breakout, I think that's the most likely candidate. I'm not telling you that I don't think it's possible for Wiggins or some of those guys, or even Deshaun Womack, but like if I had to bet the most likely, I would say it was Davion Jones. This is one that's interesting to me because I think in just terms of physical ability, I think Brian Thomas is an NFL player. I think Deshaun Womack is an NFL player. I think Denver Harris is an NFL player. Quincy Wiggins, you mentioned the physical gifts, and those guys are all ranked, I guess, higher, worse, I guess I would say, to make it more than Garrett Nussmeier, who you all have at 6. I think that's a pretty ringing endorsement for LSU's backup quarterback.
Who I think it's I have him personally 8th on my list. I know I think it's 8th, 7, and 8 on our list. It's really, really interesting for me because I think if he was a starter at, let's say, Auburn, I think he's a top 7 quarterback in the conference pretty comfortably. I'm taking him over Connor Wegman of A&M. I'm taking him over the Auburn quarterback. Peyton Thorne. I'm taking him over Florida's quarterback. You go down the list, there's not too many quarterbacks I'm taking over Garrett Nussmeier in the SEC right now. And so with that in mind, and just with how good I think he is as far as the talent goes, it was pretty easy for me to put him top 10 because, he is, like I said, I think LSU has 2 of the top 6, 7 quarterbacks in the conference on their team.
One thing that I think gives me some confidence in this team as we get into the 2023 season is the fact that you've got the right tackle Emory Jones at 16. You've got the left tackle Will Campbell at 5. This is a league that's got some pretty good defensive linemen in it, especially if you want to play in games that matter. How comfortable are you with LSU's 2 tackles?
Yeah, Will Campbell should be an all-conference player before the season and after the season. Emory Jones, I did have a little bit lower on my list in the 20s, but I'm perfectly fine with him being at that spot because he did prove it for the most part last year. I still think he needs to improve, round out his game, because there were times where it looked like he was a guard playing tackle, but he's a freshman, and I still think he has that versatility. I think Emory Jones very well could move to guard maybe at some point this year, at some point next year if they wanted him to, and that allows this team to have a lot more flexibility. So I think he's definitely a starter and definitely one of the top 20 or so players on this team, but I'm interested to see him take the next step forward because Will Campbell was on a different level. Will Campbell was all-American freshman and all that stuff, but Emory Jones is not too far behind him.
One name that I was intrigued to see in the top 15 at number 14 is Logan Diggs. We know the rich history of talented running backs that have come through LSU and the fact that hasn't been the case in the NFL draft the last couple of years. What are your expectations for Diggs?
Yeah, I was personally lower on Diggs than Billy and Shay. They outweighed me there. I have Logan Diggs at 26. I still think he's the best back. Yeah, I think he's the most talented back of the 8 that they have on the roster now, which sounds crazy to say they have 8. I know John Emery will get a shout from a lot of people saying he's the most talented. Armani Goodwin's very talented in his own right. To me, Logan Diggs, you pair the fact that he's had a productive year as a sophomore, a true sophomore at Notre Dame, has done it against Clemson, South Carolina, a lot of highly ranked competition at Notre Dame, and now he comes over to the SEC, and he's the most well-rounded back. I think he's still very explosive, and I think he has the most quality experience of any of the guys. I mean, he had 800 yards of rushing last year. I think LSU's leading rusher behind, obviously, Jayden Daniels was at somewhere around 500 or 600. So, yeah, I think he's definitely in that conversation.
There are 2 spots to go. I think y'all unveil those tomorrow, if I'm not mistaken. And it's very obvious to me who those 2 players were. I won't spoil that for the readership, but I will ask you, was number 1 unanimous?
It was. Shay went back and forth for a bit.
Okay.
Shay went back and forth, but yeah, we could say. I mean, Harold Perkins, I think, it was the unanimous number 1. So there's a spoiler for the listeners out there, but it's not too surprising. I think Harold Perkins he's just so dynamic. No matter where they line him up this year, I think he'll still be attacking. I think he'll still be getting after the quarterback, and he'll still be a playmaker. So I'm interested to see how he rounds out his game. And also, it's big for him to play linebacker because of the depth that allows LSU to have. They can plug in Greg Penn in different spots where he's more comfortable. You can plug in the Weeks brothers wherever they're more comfortable, and you have Perkins and Omar Spates kind of locking down the middle to start.
Well, let's get back to the wedding festivities. Matthew, I appreciate some time on this Thursday.
Thanks, man.
Matthew Brune in front of the Bengal Tiger over on 3. That was interesting, and I've got the list in front of me. And I know that you don't as a listener, so I'm not going to do that to you. But I want to react to some of that. There are a couple of things in the course of our conversation that we just had that made me feel, honestly, a little bit better about this LSU football team. So let's do that after a timeout here on the Hunt Palmer Show. Hey, thanks for watching Hunt on LSU. Before you get out of here, do us a couple of favors. Hit that like button, leave your comments below, and subscribe to the channel for all your Fighting Tiger football talk. See you next time.